And I was sitting in the parking lot of a convenience store. Across the street was a bank. Like, I didn't care what was going to happen to me. I was like, I'm going to rob this bank.
Your father was an FBI agent and he worked robberies.
He worked fugitive and like top 10. So he worked a lot of bank robberies. He told me two things. He said, number one, bank robbers always get caught because they're usually drug addicts and they just do it until they get caught. And he said, number two, you don't need a gun. You only need a note.
Okay, so you did the first one. There was 6 more after that. Where does Thailand come into all of this? Because you're in Bangkok now.
What is the story, everybody? Pete here from Thairish Times. You've read the title. Yes, it is true. My guest today, he's robbed 7 banks and he spent 5 years in an American federal penitentiary. Yes, indeed. Take a look at this photo. If you look at this photo, you probably think, oh, that looks like a dangerous man. That looks like someone I don't want to cross, and certainly someone I don't want to share a prison cell with. And that's pretty much how I thought when I looked at that photo. But believe it or not, this man has changed his whole life. He's turned his whole life around and he is now saving lives in Thailand. We're going to get into that in this video as well. So we're going to cover the whole thing. How did he end up going to prison? How was he robbing these banks? What was life like in prison? And what's he doing in Thailand? Let's get straight into it. Hope you enjoy.
Chris, thanks very much for coming on here. I'm excited to hear your story. I've watched a couple of videos that you've done, that you've featured on Chris's channel, Walker. Great videos there. And I'm excited to hear your story, right? So let's talk about your background first. Which part of the States are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
What I found interesting about your story, which we'll get into later on, is your father was an FBI agent and he worked robberies.
Yes. So he worked when he was, I spent some time in Columbus, Ohio. And then when we were in Columbus, Ohio, he worked fugitive and like top 10. So he worked a lot of bank robberies. And then when he was transferred to the Manhattan office, he worked Soviet counterintelligence. But yeah, my dad's he's been retired for a long time now, for 20 years, but my dad was an FBI agent. And I actually worked for the FBI as well. They had a program for the kids of employees to work summers, like during high school. So I worked in the mailroom. So technically I'm a former employee of the FBI as well.
Let's get into what led you to prison. Okay, so from my research, you were 28 years old and you got cancer, and in that way, it indirectly led you on a path that would eventually put you into prison.
Exactly. So yeah, when I was 28, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer, which is a cancer that generally affects young men between 18 and 35 years old. And I was literally in the shower, taking a shower, and I felt a lump on my left testicle. So I was like, oh, this is not normal. I went to my doctor on a Thursday, and he said, you're going to leave this appointment. You're going to go to a urologist. And so I went to the urologist and he said, you're going to have surgery on Monday. We have to remove your left testicle. And that's what, like, it happened so fast, you know? And generally, I remember the doctor telling me, like, the doctor says this, he's like, we wouldn't wish cancer on anyone, but if you had to have cancer, this is the one you want to get because it's so easy to treat. It responds so well to treatment. And there's a 95% chance that you'll be fine after the surgery. So I assumed that I was in that 95% where everything is fine, but I was wrong. I was in the 5% that it continued to advance. So I had surgery, and then I had chemotherapy. I had radiation therapy, and the tumors actually spread. So it ended up, I was stage 4 cancer. So I had tumors in my lungs. Like it had just spread like wildfire. And when you have cancer inside you, it's like, I did have a tumor in my abdomen that was about the size of like a small fist. And that's like pushing on your organs and nerves. So you have to, you deal with the pain issues, you know? And for the pain issues, I was prescribed a medication called OxyContin. So I don't know if this is known everywhere, but it was definitely an issue in the US right around the time that I was taking it. So we're talking like the early 2000s, maybe 2001, 2002. And OxyContin is a very powerful narcotic painkiller. It's an opiate, and it's a time release. So it's a pill that when you swallow it, it slowly releases the opiates over a 12-hour period, right? And once you get addicted to an opiate, you become physically addicted to it. So when you stop taking it, you experience a very nasty withdrawal, which I'm sure you've seen in Hollywood films and stuff like that. So the withdrawal sucks. And OxyContin in particular, it's like I said, you swallow it, it slowly releases the opiates over a 12-hour period. But if you crush it up and snort it, you get all those opiates at one time. And that's what I started doing. They should only give it to like terminally ill people. I probably should have never gotten it, you know? And once I became addicted to the medication, I started lying about the pain. And I started seeing a pain management doctor who subsequently was arrested by the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, back in the US, because he was very reckless with his prescriptions. He was basically giving them to anyone. He was giving way too much. And I'm not blaming him. I take full responsibility for everything that I did. But when he was arrested, all of a sudden, all of his patients had no access to OxyContin. So what I did and many others was started using heroin.
Wow. And how, like, ooh. And when you were using heroin, were you working? Did you have a job? How are you getting the money to afford this?
Yeah, I was working. I actually had a job that I didn't keep much longer because that's when my life it started falling apart, you know. But before that, or during that time, I was working for the park system. My title was a park ranger, but I was basically like a glorified landscaper. Like, you know, I was just maintaining the parks and clearing the trails and cutting the grass. But eventually I couldn't keep that job as a drug addict. And as you kind of spiral out of control, then, you know, you're going to lose your job. You're not going to be able to hold the job. Then you're going to start like hustling and scheming and scamming, you know, and you can only do that really for so long before all your bridges are burned. And that's when I decided one day, I remember I hadn't worked in 2 weeks. I didn't have any money. I didn't know like what I was going to do. And I was sitting in the parking lot of a convenience store, and across the street was a bank. And at that point, I didn't really care I didn't care what was going to happen to me. I was like, I'm going to rob this bank. Okay. I've never done this. I don't know anybody that did it. I don't know how to do it. You know, I know that there's Hollywood stuff, but I do. My dad did work bank robbery, so I didn't know how to do it, but I knew a couple things, you know. He told me two things. He said, number one, bank robbers always get caught because they're usually drug addicts, you know, and they just do it until they get caught. And he said, number two, you don't need a gun, you only need a note, because the tellers in the United States are trained to just give you the money that they have in their drawer right there, rather than, you know, they don't know if you have a gun or not. So just to keep everybody safe, it's just easier to give you the money so you leave, you know? So I knew that. So I was like, I'm going to rob this bank. And I sat in my car for a couple hours trying to get the nerve up, you know, to do this. And I was like, so I need a note, you know, so I have like a pen and paper in my car, and I write some different notes. You know, I was trying to, the first one was like really aggressive. I talked about it with Chris. It was like, you know, again, this is totally not my character, but this is something that I did. I'm a totally different person now. But the initial note was like, bitch, I'll kill you. Give me the money. you know, and I was like, that's not me. That's too aggressive. I also didn't know how the system worked. Like, if I say that if I threaten someone, that can probably add more time to my sentence. If I say I have a gun, that can probably add more time. I wasn't sure. So I crumpled that up, threw it on the floor. And a couple hours later, I had like 4 or 5 notes crumpled up on the floor. But then I had a note that I was going to use that said, "You are being robbed. Give me the money in your drawer and I will leave." I thought that kind of was not very aggressive, and it's just pretty simple. And that's what I did. I went in, I stood in line. There was a couple people in front of me. And when they called me up, I walked up and I just opened the piece of paper so she could read what I had written on it. And she read it. And then her eyes kind of went wide and she looked at me. And then she just took the money in her drawer and handed it to me. And I took it and I said, "Thank you." And I walked out the door. And I didn't know, like, are the cops going to be waiting for me in the parking lot, or are they going to chase me? Or, you know, again, I don't know how this worked.
When you did it, was it so discreet that no one else in the queue behind you even noticed?
Had no idea. Had no idea. Basically, every time was like that. And it was so, it just seemed like a regular transaction, just like someone in line at the bank, you know, like
How much was
every
it?
time. What's that?
How much did you get?
Well, over the course of the 7, here's what I'll say. I don't want to say how much I got. It's not worth it. I can tell you that. And I can tell you that ultimately I robbed 7 banks. I was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. And I could have worked a minimum wage job during that 5 years and made more money than robbing a bank. It's not like Hollywood. It's not like I was in the vault. It wasn't some huge heist. You're basically getting the money that the teller has right next to her, you know?
So we're probably talking maybe a couple of thousand, 2 or 3, 4,000 maybe.
Yeah, it could be a little higher, could be a little lower. There were some variables, you know.
You weren't
But I gotta
walking
keep
out
a
there with
little
2 big bags.
Yeah, not at all. You know, it was always just some money that I could just hold in my hand and just walk out the door, you know, like not very suspicious.
Okay, so you did the first one, and then talk us through, because there was 6 more after that.
Right. So I did the first one and I got right in my car. I had parked across the street. I didn't want to park in the parking lot of the bank. And I drove to see my drug dealer in Newark, New Jersey, and I bought heroin. And that money lasted me it lasted me a few weeks. And as it was getting low, I was like, I have to do this again. Oh, before I forget, yeah, I would always look at the newspaper the next day. And I remember in the newspaper, there was a surveillance picture of me, but it wasn't very good. It was kind of far away. And it kind of looked like me, like I knew that it was me, obviously. And I drove to my parents' house to go pick something up. And my mom is on the front porch and she has the newspaper under her arm. And she comes down to my car and she goes, "Chris, honey, did you see this in the paper? This guy looks like you." And I look at it and I'd already seen it. And I said, "Oh, wow." I said, "I hope nobody really thinks that's me. That's crazy. That does kind of look like me, you know?" But she had no idea that that's something that I would actually do. So my mom.
Did you panic when you saw that? That would really stress me out, man. Like, there's your picture in the newspaper, and then people, like your own mother says, "Oh, it looks like you." That would freak me out, man.
Yeah, it was definitely, like, again, it wasn't the best picture. You couldn't see my whole face. It was kind of like an overhead shot. I'm surprised that they have such awful cameras in banks. You know what I mean? You know, but that was also, after that, I said, okay, I can't rob any banks that are going to. I lived in a county called Monmouth County, and the main newspaper in Monmouth County is called the Asbury Park Press, and that's the one that would get delivered to my parents' house every day. So after that first bank, I said, I'm not going to rob any banks in Monmouth County. I have to go outside the county. I can't have anything in the Asbury Park Press newspaper.
You went on then to do 6 more, using the same technique, the note.
Yeah, I use the exact same note, the exact same wordage. You are being robbed. Give me the money and I will leave. And basically everyone went exactly the same. I would show them the note. They would read it. Their eyes would go wide, and then they would hand me the money.
And then how'd you get caught?
I had a previous drug charge that I went to court, and I was court mandated to see a substance abuse counselor. And if I didn't maintain these appointments, then I could get in more trouble. So I was adamant that I maintain these appointments with my counselor. And I went to, I had an appointment, and I remember it was like a Monday. I had $50 in my wallet. I had done heroin that morning. So like, and I had done the last of my heroin. So I know that it's like a countdown to withdrawal. I know I'm probably good for like 6 to 8 hours before I need more. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go see my counselor. And then I'm going to drive over the bridge to Red Bank, New Jersey, because I know a guy there. I got $50, buy some heroin. Then I got to rob a bank, you know, to keep this going. So I go to my counselor, and for the first time, he's kind of like I would generally go in and have this 10-minute meeting with him. He just asked me a few questions, how I'm doing, and we just talk a little bit, and then he sends me on my way. This time we had our little talk, and then he was kind of just like quiet. Like he's like, hang on one second. And he's got his computer screen in front of him, and, you know, I didn't know what he was doing. In hindsight, I see what he was doing. He was stalling. After like 5 minutes of like some very basic small talk and some stall tactics, he was like, okay, we're good. We're good. I'll see you next week. I was like, all right, I'll see you. And when I walked out of the office, there was 5 FBI agents in the parking lot. And I knew, you know, that they see me, I see them. And they said, Chris? I said, yeah. They said, do you know who we are? I said, yeah. They said, do you know why we're here? I said, yeah, I know. And they said to me, they said, we know that your dad is retired. And we can also see that you worked in the mailroom 30 years ago. So they said, we're going to treat you like family, you know, like they said, what happens with your sentence is between you and the judge and the court system, but we're going to be nice to you, you know, and they were, and this actually, it was like a sense of relief came over me. You know, I really just felt, I was like, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this.
You went to court then. How long from the time you were arrested to the time you were sentenced?
So what happens when you get arrested? You go to jail. I went to the Monmouth County Jail. And jail is for people that either have a sentence less than 1 year or are waiting to go to court. So jail kind of sucks. You can't go outside. Nobody knows what's happening to them. Like, you haven't been sentenced. You don't know, you know, your family is pissed at you. Like, jail is, people with a lot of anxiety, people that are coming off drugs like myself. I remember they asked me, they said, do you use any drugs? I said, yes, I use heroin and methadone. So they put me in the medical unit to monitor like my withdrawal symptoms. The medical unit was so crowded, the jail was so crowded. I was in a 2-person cell with 6 other people. So there's 2 bunks, and then there's 5 of us laying on the floor. That was pretty rough, you know, but and then they moved me to a maximum security section. And it took 7 months between when I was arrested, but until I finally got my sentencing, you know, and then it was about a month after sentencing that they designate your prison, and then they send you there. So I think about 8 months total.
So you went cold turkey then in jail?
Cold turkey. Yeah.
How long did it take to come off the heroin?
I think it probably, I felt like the diarrhea and the nausea stopped after about 7 days, and the sweating probably took about 3 weeks, and to be able to sleep normally was probably like 2 months. It was a long, drawn out process, you know.
Jeez. And then, so you had, okay, so just explain this part because this is quite interesting. You had a judge that was quite fair and kind of did a lot of research on your background.
Yes, I had a judge. Her name was, I believe it was Judge. Well, I don't have to say her name, but she was, she was probably a little younger than my mom, right? And I had people write letters, you know, people that had known me for a long time. And like, if you looked at my story, the timeline, like I was very normal, pretty fairly honest, law-abiding citizen, you know, kind of I was a kid experimental kid too, but it was obvious that I wasn't like a career criminal. And if you look at the timeline, you can see that after I got cancer and I became terribly addicted to the medication, and my doctor was arrested by the DEA, you can see this downward spiral right from there. And she read all these letters, and she was just I remember the day of sentencing, she actually appeared a little choked up. I think because she was probably a mother too, and my mother and my whole family is sitting right behind me during sentencing. And it was just really kind. Like she was very kind. And the way the way the system works is they have what's called sentencing guidelines. So they put together all of this information, like my criminal history, did I have a gun, all sorts of stuff like that. And they get a range. And the judges allowed me to sentence me anywhere in that range. And mine was 57 to 72 months. So that's basically 5 to 6 years. And it's her discretion. But she pretty much she has to stick to that. So she sentenced me to the low end, 57 months, which is like 4 years and 9 months.
And then so you went to serve your sentence in a federal prison, right?
Right.
Okay. What was that like?
So that was pretty interesting because I didn't know, you know, so I had spent 8 months in jail, and you talk to a lot of people, and some people are like, oh, you're going to federal prison. It's like, you know, it's like the best. You can work for a minimum wage and you get conjugal visits, and all that stuff is totally not true, you know. But I remember they called me one day. They said, pack your stuff. This is in jail. I packed my belongings and I went. They sent me out. I get on a bus, and now I'm going to prison, you know. And this all happens really fast. Like, you don't know when it's going to happen. They don't tell you, oh, you're going to go to prison next week, you know. It's just like, here you go. So I'm on this bus with a bunch of other guys, and we're shackled. Our feet are shackled, and we have shackles around our waist that our hands are attached to. And we basically get to the prison and like walk inside, and you kind of go through like an intake process where they give you your clothes, and they make an ID for you, and then they walk you into your unit. And I remember they opened the door to the unit, and it was probably like 6 or 7 at night. And each unit had about 300 people in it. And like when the door opens, everybody knows that, you know, new people are coming in. So like everybody stops and all the heads turn, you know. And going into that unit was me and one other guy, you know, and everybody just like stops and stares, and you just got to, you walk in there, and I was just like, what the hell, man? Like it was pretty intense. Yeah.
And then do they ask to see your papers to see what crimes why you're there? Because they obviously, I mean, I see these prison stuff. They want to check your papers in case you've you know done something terrible to a child. Then you're in serious trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened was the corrections officer, he says, all right, you're in cell 112. So I go over there, and you know, I throw my stuff on the bunk. I don't have a lot of stuff, just what they gave me, you know. And like 10 minutes later, a guy comes down, into my cell, white guy, and his name, he's like, "Hey, what's up? I'm Steve." He's like, "I'm the shot caller in this building." And he had like deodorant and toothbrush and toothpaste and shower shoes. And he was like, "You're gonna need these. You don't owe, you don't owe me anything, but we're going to need to see your paperwork. You have 1 week to get your paperwork, because you have to like write the court clerk where you were sentenced. And it's a really easy process to get your paperwork, but that's definitely something that happens. And prison is like, the reason Steve came to me is because I was white and he was white. Prison is, it's kind of divided by race. Everybody lives together and for the most part gets along. But if I was a black guy, and let's say I was a blood gang member from Washington, D.C., then the shot caller from the D.C. Bloods would come and talk to me and want to see my paperwork. If I was if I was like a Mexican gangbanger from L.A., then those guys would come and talk to me. So, but it's very much a thing where they check your paperwork. They want to know why you're there. And
when he checked your paperwork, what was his reaction? He probably was just like, "Oh, cool. Okay, no worries."
Yeah. But bank robbery it's not a bad crime. For being in prison.
Yeah, I mean, it's socially, like, it's not really, I'd rather be in a cell with a bank robber than a child molester.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And at that place, so I was at a medium security federal prison in New Jersey called Ferreton. And if you were a child molester, basically you probably wouldn't show your paperwork. And if you don't show your paperwork, then it's just a matter of days before you're either going to go to the corrections officer and tell them like, "I fear for my life," and then they're going to put you in what they call the SHU, the segregated housing unit, where you're just like in a cell by yourself and you do your time that way, or you stand your ground, and that never ends well. You know what I mean? Those guys get beat down really bad, and then they get transferred to another prison.
Have you witnessed that happening where someone come in and didn't want to show their paperwork?
Yes. Yeah. And I never saw like basically the guys that wouldn't show their paperwork would just go what we call check in. So that's just going to the corrections officer in the unit and saying, "I fear for my life." So then they go and they're protected.
When you were in prison, did you relapse again, or were you drug free from then on?
No, drugs are rampant in prison, and I definitely was. I didn't have a habit in prison. In jail, I didn't do any, and then when I got to prison, I would do them occasionally. Because they are there. They're readily available.
There was a pivotal moment where you decided that was it. There's no more drugs.
I would occasionally buy heroin from a guy who, a black guy, and him and I had like a good rapport. Like we would joke around and stuff like that, and he would front me the heroin, and then I would pay him when I went to commissary. He would say like, "Okay, just on commissary day, give me 2 books of stamps." Stamps is currency in prison when I was there, and so was pouches of tuna fish. So a pouch of tuna fish was worth $1, and a book of stamps at that time was worth $7. So that's your prison currency. And on the day that I was supposed to pay him back, I didn't have the money. I was getting, my sweet, beloved, precious mother would put $60 on my account twice a month. And she forgot to do it on this day. And you can only go to the commissary on your chosen day, which mine was a Wednesday. So on the day that I owed him the money, I didn't have it. And he came to me as, again, we had a good rapport. And he was like, "Chris, you and I are cool, but this is how bad things happen in prison. You know what I mean? So just don't let this happen again." And I went and I borrowed 2 books of stamps and I gave it to him, and I never did drugs after that. I said, what are you doing? Also, at that point, I had about 2 years left And I was like, you need to stop being a loser, you know, like just get your life together, you know, like you're getting out in a couple years, like work really hard at being a better person. So I'm kind of glad that happened, because that definitely sparked a change.
What changes did you make in your life? What was your focus then? Where'd you put your mind?
Yeah, I started exercising. I would exercise a little bit, but I became kind of obsessed with running. And I would run. They had these treadmills that they weren't even electric. It was just like a plastic mat thing on these rollers, you know. And there was a gray cinder block wall, and that's what I'm staring at. And I would just run and run. And first I can run for 2 minutes, and then 5 minutes, and then gradually I'm running longer and longer. And there was another guy that would run next to me, and he kind of had the same, most people use them just for a couple minutes to warm up and then go like lift weights or do something else. But me and this guy would just run and stare at these cinder block gray walls, And this one corrections officer would like, he was a dick. He would be like, you guys are like hamsters on the wheel, you know what I mean? Like you guys are going nowhere, like he was just being a dick. And I would just ignore him, and I would stare at the cinder blocks, and I would just go. And then, I would run for hours.
So then you finished your sentence, you got out. What happened then? What did you do then?
Oh, let me tell you one quick story that I was telling someone. I actually told my dad this. I never told him. I was changing, and then I'll get back to that question. So I was in a medium security prison, and I didn't get in any trouble there. So then they decided they were going to move me to a low security prison. So I moved from Fairton to Fort Dix, which are both in New Jersey. But my cellmate in Fairton he was an associate of the Colombo crime family, which it's one of the big five mafia families in New York. And he was a really nice guy. And he actually told me, because those guys are privy to some information that not everybody gets. He said, Chris, you're going to be moving to Fort Dix in a couple days. Like how my cellmate is the one that tells me this, because they don't like you to know where you're going to go, But the Italian guys at Fairton had a lot of friends and at Fort Dix. So the commissary, like if you're in one prison, you have access to the commissary where you can buy stuff. And if you change prisons, you can bring your commissary from one prison to the next. So the prison that I was in at Fairton sold on their commissary sriracha sauce. They sold a lot of stuff, but the important things in this story is sriracha sauce, olive oil, and dental floss. At Fort Dix, they don't sell that stuff. So all the Italian guys at Fairton put together this package for me. I looked like Santa Claus. I had this big laundry bag full of sriracha sauce, dental floss, and olive oil. And they said, when you get to Fort Dix, you have to, when you get out on the yard, ask any Italian guy for a Joey. I'm not going to say his last name. And so I get out and I get to the yard at Fort Dix. I find who I'm supposed to find, and I'm like, yeah, I'm Chris. My cellmate was, this guy at Fairton, and I got a lot of stuff. And those guys were so, it was like I said, I was like Santa Claus bringing all this great stuff to them. So at Fort Dix, I never had a problem at Fairton, but I was really welcomed at Fort Dix with open arms. And Fort Dix is also the same prison, and he was there at the same time. There was a movie called Blow, where Johnny Depp played a guy named Boston George Young, who was a big cocaine smuggler in the 80s, and he had connections to Pablo Escobar. And George Young was at Fort Dix when I was there. I never knew him, but he was
Wow.
he was there at the same time. Yeah. So I got out in 2012. I was 2007 to 2012, and early 2012. And I think I was just about to turn 40. and I had to start over. I had to start my life over. And at that point, I had been working on mending the relationships, like with my family, that I had ruined. So I moved back in with my parents, and we got it was such a great time, that period of time, being to be like an adult, living with them and being like friends. And that was a really nice time. But I started working. I got a job at Whole Foods, which is a big grocery store. And I was literally, it's not really easy for an ex-con to get a job. It's not impossible by any means, but you're going to be kind of limited. So I had a job stocking the shelves. I'm working with like kids in high school and a couple years older, and like, part-time people and stuff. And all this time I'm running. Now I keep running. I started running in prison, and I keep running. I start to do half marathons, and started running marathons, and I worked my way up at Whole Foods. Like if a little bit higher position, I would apply for it, get it, and I just kept kind of working my way up until I had a decent job working in purchasing, like. So I was making better money, and I was clean and sober, and I was
You got your life together, basically.
yeah.
Cool, man. That's cool. I love to hear redemption stories. And then where does Thailand come into all of this? Because you're in Bangkok now.
Yeah, I'm in Bangkok now. I live in Sriracha. So what had happened is I was watching Anthony Bourdain. I think this might have been in 2015, and he was in Chiang Mai, and he's right outside the North Gate, and he was eating the stewed pork leg over rice with a soft-boiled egg, and the lady serving it wore a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
And like he's sitting on a little plastic stool that very well, the little street food plastic stools, and there's motorbikes driving by in the background, and he's eating this pork, and I was just like, I didn't know anybody that had been to Thailand. Like I never really traveled. I went to Mexico a couple times, and I was like, and at this point I'm working, I have like money in the bank, I'm saving money, and I was like, I'm going to go to Thailand, and I'm going to find the lady in the cowboy hat, and I'm going to eat that stewed pork leg over rice with a soft-boiled egg. And I did. I didn't even have a passport. So I got a passport, and I bought a ticket, and I came to Thailand, and I loved it. And I saw dogs everywhere. And then I came back the next year and saw even more of Thailand. And then I started paying attention to some of the organizations and the people that help the dogs, and I started following them on some social media. And then in 2018, I said, you know what, I'm going to take a 6-month sabbatical from my job, and I'm going to go to Thailand for 6 months to volunteer at different dog rescue organizations and just like meet people and see how that goes. And that's exactly what I did. And I volunteered at several places. And then I remember you talked to Michael, who's my friend and my boss, and he's the founder of the Man That Rescues Dogs Foundation. And he was on my radar. So I sent him a message. I said, hey, do you need any volunteers? And he said, yeah, come by, So I went there, and Michael picked me up. And at that time, in 2018, I think he had about 300 dogs there. The shelter was about half the size that it is now. And he hadn't taken a day off in like 6 years. So he needed some help. And he did have a staff. There was probably at that time, like maybe 15 staff members. Again, 300 dogs. And I was involved in everything. Like some of the other places I volunteered at, they keep the volunteers kind of insulated from most everything, like volunteers are just walking dogs and stuff, which is great. That's important. Dogs need to go for walks. But when I was with Michael, I'm on the feeding route. I'm going on rescues. I'm sleeping in a bamboo hut, waking up at 5 a.m. with the staff and like picking up poop. And I just really love being involved in all aspects of dog rescue. And I ended up staying for about 4 months. And then it was time for me to go back home, And before I went home, I think it was like the day of, Michael said, would you like to come and work here? And I was like, yeah, he was like, I can't, the money's going to suck. I said, I don't care. You know what I mean? I said, do you have a bamboo hut? Like, do I have enough money for food? I'm in, And, but I had some loose ends to tie up. So I had to go home. I actually had a dog. I have a dog. I had to, bring her, I had to go home and get her and bring her with me, bring her back. And, I was married in the past, and we had been separated for a long time, but I was never officially divorced. So I had to get a divorce. So I went home for 8 months to tie up some loose ends. And I came back January 2020. So exactly 4 years ago. And I've been working there ever since. And I told you, when I was there as a volunteer, there was 300 dogs. There was maybe 15 staff. And now the shelter is more than doubled in size. We have 760 dogs. We have 44 staff. We have 45 dogs in our gang we call the Wheelchair Mafia. That's all the disabled dogs that were hit by cars and motorbikes. And yeah, it's great.
And is your plan to stay in Thailand, continue on? Are you in Thailand for the long haul?
Yeah, I'm in for the long haul. I love, like, I never wake up and like, oh, I got to go to work today. Like, oh, I don't want to, like, I think when you love what you do and when you take pride in what you do, like, it's easy for me to go to sleep. I don't stay up haunted by stuff. I go to sleep and I wake up ready to go see the dogs. Actually, being in Bangkok, Michael and I are doing this walk, so I'm going to be gone for 6 days, and I'm going to be missing. I'm going to be missing the dogs.
So tell us about your walk. What are you doing?
So we're walking 33 kilometers a day for a total of 99 kilometers, and we have 16 sponsors. So we had special shirts made with our sponsors' logos. Our sponsors paid 5,000 baht to have their logo on our shirt. And then we're going to ask the lovely people of Thailand to donate 99 baht. That's, because we're walking 99 kilometers. And we're just trying to do something to have some fun. People that live in Bangkok can come and join us on the walk, or come meet us, say hello, and by the time this comes out, your video comes out, we'll have done it already. So hopefully it'll be a success, but it's already a success.
Do you have any regrets? Because you've come a long way, it's a story of redemption. I mean, you, an ex-bank robber, drug addict, you've turned your life around and now you're saving lives. Do you regret some parts of your life, or do you think it should have played out that way? Because if it didn't play out that way, I wouldn't be here today.
I believe that exactly. Like, I don't know if none of that, if that didn't happen, I don't think that I would be here now. But I will say I do regret the strain that I put on my family, but I'm also very grateful that I have I have a great family, and they're very supportive and forgiving. But that is my one regret, is putting, my dad was an FBI agent. So when I'm in the newspaper, obviously, number one, he's upset that, I was addicted to drugs and that my life was spiraling out of control. But then he's got the humiliation. And my mother was a teacher. She knows everybody in the town. So the embarrassment is probably, they probably don't care about it as much as I do. But just the pain that I put them through is a regret. But knowing our relationship now, I know it's all good. But that's the one thing that I'll never get over.
Have your parents been out to Thailand?
No, I want to get them out here, but I don't think, my mom's 76, my dad's 71. To fly from JFK, it's like 26 hours in a plane. I just don't know. I could probably get them. I brought my dog with me. I could probably use my dog to get them to come out. Like, you got to come see Gracie before, you know, but I would love for them to come out. I don't know if it'll happen, but.
What's your t-shirt say? It says list of people I like. List of people I
Dogs.
like dogs. Number
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
dogs.
Yeah, that's our, we sell these. So if you guys want one, TMTRD ORG on Instagram, message us on Facebook, TikTok.
I'll leave the links for the website down below in the description box. So if anyone does want to make a donation, they can go in via the link.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, tmtrd.org. And thank you so much. Yeah, for sure. We're about an hour and a half from Bangkok. It's pretty easy to get there. And to anybody watching, like to any of your subscribers, and if you're living in Thailand and you love dogs, just come visit. The Wheelchair Mafia walks twice a day, and just come pet some dogs, hang out. You know, it's my favorite place in the world.
All right, Chris, look, it's been a pleasure, man. Best of luck, and thanks for coming on here today. And all the best what you're doing in Thailand. You're doing great things.
Hey, thanks, Pete. And again, I love your channel. It's a valuable resource to anybody that lives here or considering living here. So you keep doing what you're doing, and we hope to see you, man. Next time you're in town, man, come see us.